The sickness felt like growing pains, a deep ache that started in my bones. I felt my skin pulling tight against itself. My feet were stretching out toward the door, and my head hit the ceiling. But still, I was growing, and I broke through the second-story floor. When I stood up, the whole log cabin was rubble at my feet. I looked out at the great wilderness. I could see mountains and snow, and way in the distance, the city skyline. The city was home, but how could a giant woman ever return home looking like this? Hiya, fellas. I'm Louella. I'm 25 years old and 300 feet tall. I'm looking for my boyfriend, who might be the only one who can bring me back down to size. I wasn't always this big. I had a normal life and a normal job. I worked in advertising and was making a name for myself as a crackshot copywriter. I was that kind of gal that lived life by instinct, and I was doing well for myself. But then I started a secret office romance with this guy, Alan. He was a fellow copywriter, handsome and funny, and he seemed to get me in a way other guys didn't. And we fell in love. One night at dinner, I told Alan that I had interviewed for the editor position. He was surprised and said that he interviewed for the position a week ago, and the rest of the dinner was kinda awkward from there. Alan was a truly great guy, but the work thing was kinda weird. I'd like to say that it got better with time, but when I got the job promotion, it made things way worse. I was thrilled to get the job, and I loved the corner office that came with it. But becoming Alan's boss was hard on the relationship. He was sarcastic to me at work, and then he'd be all passive-aggressive in our relationship. Alan wouldn't stop calling me ma'am like he did at work. I didn't want to be his boss. I wanted to be his girlfriend. I tried to talk to him about it, but he'd just shrug and say, "It is what it is." I thought about breaking up with Alan. I ended up telling this work friend Amelia about our secret relationship and its troubles. I made her promise to keep it a secret. I didn't want it getting out at the office. But then she told me that she was going to be leaving the company. She said she found another firm and she got hired as a senior copywriter. She even said they were hiring and she could get me an interview. But I couldn't leave my job. It was nice to get things off of my chest, and I went back to work with a new spirit. But things were still off with Alan. I was texting him one night trying to get him to go out with me. He said he was busy catching up on work and didn't have time for fun. I didn't know if he was serious or upset at me for assigning him work. I couldn't figure out how to separate things, and when I was complaining to Amelia again, she had an interesting suggestion. She said that I should write a breakup letter to him, but not send it. Just think about it. Give it a week, and if it still felt the same after 7 days, I could send the letter and move on. It sounded dramatic, and I thought maybe we needed some time away from the office, just the two of us on a romantic getaway. I talked to Alan, and he was excited for the adventure. So we planned a trip to a snowy cabin miles away from the big city. At first, things were awesome. We started to laugh and let our hair down. We built a fire, and just as we were getting cozy, we heard a strange sound coming from the cellar. It sounded like a howling wind, and when I asked him to go down and check, he said, "Yes, ma'am. I'll go down to the cellar right away, boss." Already he was at it with that boss ma'am crap again. Down past the cellar door, there was nothing but coal. At first, we could barely see. We turned on the flashlights on our phone, and a wind tunnel seemed to be coming from a dusty book on the shelf. It was open and the pages were flapping around. I closed it shut and everything stopped. The book was strange. Mystic symbols were etched into its leathery cover. We took it up from the cellar and opened it. It was old, whatever it was, and in a language we didn't really understand, except for some words that seemed to be half English at least. Alan was reciting from some weird passage repeating Giantess amoris or something. Suddenly, the howl returned, and the tree branches scratched violently outside the windows. It kind of creeped us out, and we decided to call it an early night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Alan and how separated from him I felt. I decided I'd write that maybe breakup letter to Alan and get my feelings out onto the page. I guess getting it off of my chest felt good because I fell asleep by the fire and woke up with my answer. In my heart, I wanted to fight for Alan. Just then, I heard a noise in the other kitchen and I thought it was Alan, but I couldn't find him anywhere. When I returned, I found my almost breakup letter crumpled up. Oh no, I thought. Alan found my letter. I had to find him to explain. I searched all over the cabin, but he was nowhere to be found. I kept bumping my head and I felt bigger and the furniture felt smaller. Unless my eyes were playing tricks on me, the cabin was shrinking. That book felt tiny, and when I looked at it closely, I saw an image that explained everything. There was an illustration of a huge woman, a giantess, next to a tiny man, the size of a flea. That's about when I felt the sickness. My body was outgrowing the whole room. Soon, I busted out of the cabin and was growing beyond the trees. I could see the city skyline and I wanted to be home in my bed. I didn't know if it was a dream or what, but I started running. I was stomping past farm country trying to get back home. Apparently, my steps were taking its toll on the earth below, because by the time I reached the city, the military and helicopters and tanks lined up to stop me like I was King Kong or something. They used megaphones and begged for me not to harm anyone. But I wasn't a monster. Tears welled up in my eyes. My life was over. I was a big giant freakazoid who lost her boyfriend. I tried to say something, but my voice shook the earth. They thought I was attacking them. I was crying and my monstrous teardrops were like a typhoon splashing through the city. And then I felt something hot on my foot. I figured those military guys were waging war on my big toe. I backed away, begging them to stop, but my voice made things worse. I had to find a way to communicate. I let the military guys follow me to the ocean. Once they cleared the beaches, I wrote, "Not dangerous. Please help," in the sand. I looked up and a jet plane was writing a message in the sky. It said, "We found Alan. You're safe." I looked closely, and I saw some military captain guy with a megaphone. He was holding that ancient book we found, and he was reading it. Apparently, the spell worked the opposite charm on Alan. When I grew into a giantess, he shrank, which is why I couldn't find him. He found his cell phone and had to use his whole body to dial the keypad. He had to hop up and down just to text an emergency line. He was brought to the military captain who was scrambling to stop my reign of terror, and Alan was able to point them to the ancient book. They brought it to a translator who isolated a spell that he thought could reverse the effects. The captain was reciting the words through a megaphone, and for the first time, I began to relax a little. But I was still worried that Alan was already through with me after finding that stupid fake breakup letter. I lowered my body all the way to the ground and looked closely. There on the sand was Alan, tinier than I imagined. He was waving at me, saying something I couldn't understand. His voice only sounded like squeaks to me, and I'm sure my voice was just a roar. At that moment, everything made sense. Alan and I lost balance, and we just couldn't hear each other. Before, he kept hearing commands, and I kept hearing complaints because of the boss-employee dynamic to our relationship. I decided I would call Amelia after shrinking and see if she could get me an interview at her new job. I'd rather have Alan in my life than some fancy title. I learned a pretty important lesson. There's this saying, it's easy to be wise after the event. And it's so true. Hindsight is 20/20. Sometimes it takes experience to show us what's important. The day sank away, and during the night, there was that old familiar ache in my bones. The spell had worked, and I was crying tears of joy when I saw Alan growing. We found equal footing and hugged out our problems. But just then, something strange happened. The ocean began to whirl and the howl was back, but twice as loud. In the distance, women exploded with giantess growth and began popping up everywhere. There was a rumble and we took shelter with that military captain who was about to explode with anger. I said, the spell must have caused a chain of effects. It's easy to be wise after the event, he said. Funny. That's just what I was thinking. And then the captain shrank too, and we couldn't hear him anymore. Alan spoke up and said, we better get wise soon. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in a world of tiny men and giant women. I don't know if I'm ready for a new Giantess adventure, but I guess I don't have a choice. Do you have a hard time being heard? Tell us about it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden wisdom stories. Remember, when you share our stories, you're sharing wisdom.